Michael Penix impressed in his NFL and preseason debut versus the Miami Dolphins.
You are Locked On Falcons, your daily Atlanta Falcons podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, everyone, to another illustrious episode of the Locked On Falcons podcast, your daily Atlanta Falcons podcast, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. We're going to help you find the qualified candidates that you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. So, guys, if you don't know me, I'm your very humble host, Aaron Freeman. Your very humble hater, Aaron Freeman, a.k.a. Mr. Drew, a.k.a. Sirius Black, a.k.a. the Jolly Green Giant, a.k.a. Mr. a.k.a. been covering the Falcons for almost 2 decades, formerly at falcfans.com, RIP, still going strong on this illustrious podcast. And I thank each and every one of you that is an everydayer that goes strong with me each and every day, because you make this podcast your first listen each and every day. And all you got to do to become an everydayer is subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. So today we are talking about the Falcons' 20-13 preseason opening loss to the Miami Dolphins. We're going to be talking quite a bit about Michael Penix's debut, talk about the impact of the injuries to Bralen Trice and DeMarcco Hellams, talk about which defensive linemen I'm buying stock on. We'll talk about the other various rookies and whatnot. But, overall, it wasn't a particularly impressive football game, as it often is in these preseason games. I think there were like 33 possessions in this game between the two teams. And typically an NFL game is going to have like 20, maybe in the preseason you get like 25 or something like that. And you got so much more because neither team could really sustain offense, some turnovers, all that sort of stuff. Pretty sloppy game, but it's preseason, and that's how it goes. That's why it's always funny to me whenever I see people, in the hours before these games, I'm so excited. Game day's here. We're finally getting to see Falcons football. And I'm like, do you guys not know what preseason football looks like? Like, is there a collective amnesia when it comes to what the preseason actually looks like? Because the picture that you guys have in some of you, again, not everybody, not trying to yuck anybody's young, but some people I'm just going like, do you guys have like the memory of goldfish? You know what preseason looks like. You've been a Falcon fan long enough that Falcons preseason is always terrible. Like, I don't know why people get excited about that, but hey, to each their own. If you enjoy watching terrible football, hey, Falcons preseason stuff is for you. But I understand at least this one time why people were excited, right? And what wasn't so terrible with Falcons football, because it was Michael Penix, right? And so I will forgive you for being excited for Michael Penix. We were all excited to see what exactly do the Falcons have in Michael Penix, and he looked solid, right? He lived up to my expectations. I'm not going to sit here and tell you he was incredible, right? He was solid, right? 9 for 16, 104 yards in this game, right? He had that one great sort of fade ball where he dropped it in the bucket on a 40-yard play to Chris Blair. We knew he could air it out. So it's like, hey, we knew he could do that. So it's not like, oh, Michael Penix threw a deep pass. Like, what? Oh, I've never seen that happen before. If you watched any amount of him at Washington, you knew he could do that. So it was nice to see that. That was probably his best throw of the night. I think really what impressed me more so than, the arm strength and that throw or anything like that, just how decisive and poised he looked. And those weren't, again, that didn't surprise me or anything like that. I didn't see anything watching the game that I thought would be categorized as a poor decision. I thought one of the things I liked seeing in this game was him operating the quick game. That was something that part of the reason why, and people hated this comp, but it is, I'm going to die on this hill. That's why I compared him to a Tagovailoa, because I thought the quick game was an untapped area of his NFL potential, playing in that offense at Washington where they were just airing it out all the time. We saw some quick game stuff, and I thought he did a really good job of that. So I'm eager to go back and look through the film with that. The only knock I would have on Michael Penix's performance, accuracy was a little off on a couple of throws, kind of made his receivers work a little hard. It wasn't like he was throwing sailing balls 5 feet over guys' heads or anything like that, but just like, putting the ball on the back shoulder when it should have been on the front shoulders, those types of things where it's like, okay, he needs to tweak that. But again, we talked about that post-draft. Like, that was the one concern we had, the main concern we had with Penix with the mechanics. And it seemed like to me, and again, we'll see if that is confirmed when I rewatch the game, but it seemed like a couple of those instances where he wasn't able to set his feet. He was under some pressure. He had to get rid of the ball, and the ball kind of, that accuracy kind of veered off a little bit. And again, that's what we kind of thought, that was to me the biggest thing that he would need to work on in the background as he's, taking these mental reps behind Kirk Cousins for the next 2 years. And so it wasn't a shock to me that, he didn't have the Drew Brees level of pinpoint accuracy on some of those throws. So we'll check the tape on that, but that's the only real knock I had on it, where it was like, yeah. So that's why I say, like, he was what I thought he was, not to pull the Denny Green quote, but I think when we go back through the film with the fine-tooth comb, we'll see if there's other things, how he goes through these progressions and reads and whatnot, and looking at the footwork, focusing on that when they get access to the All-22 later. But overall, again, an impressive debut. Not going to get hyperbolic and be like he proved himself to be the franchise quarterback. He's proven that he's worth the 8th overall pick. I'll leave the hyperbole for the rest of the people that want to go there, but it was an impressive debut. It was an impressive step one, and hopefully a 3-step process as we watch Michael Penix this summer, and then if everything goes according to plan, never again for the next 2 years, so until the next preseason, I guess. So these games are important, so it'll be interesting to see what his development is as we go over these next couple of weeks. But I thought it was a very impressive debut. You're not going to get me poo-pooing this like I did last year with Desmond Ritter's one drive. I was like, all right, like it was pretty meh, the Desmond Ritter drive, not the Michael Penix. But Michael Penix was solid in this game. So we'll see what happens with Michael Penix in the future. But it wasn't all positive for the Falcons, at least in this game, because they have potentially major injuries to DeMarcco Hellams and Bralen Trice. We'll talk about how those injuries impact those players and impact the team as we continue today's Locked On Falcons preseason rapid reaction. Passion, drive, patience is the formula for winning championships, and it's also what's going to keep your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, from superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, seatbelt covers like I just ordered a couple of weeks ago. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or your money back, because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash, baby. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. So before we get into my thoughts on the Falcons injuries, want to plug the Locked On Fantasy Football podcast. I'm sure they'll be breaking down all the highlights, who's moved up, who adjusted their ADPs based off of this weekend's action. Locked On Fantasy Football, of course, is free and available on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So probably other than Michael Penix, probably the other big story from this game was the injuries to DeMarcco Hellams and Bralen Trice. Both of them did not look good. Hellams got carted off, I think, on the second play from scrimmage. I didn't see exactly the replay or anything, but there was a bunch of collisions on that play, and maybe someone rolled it into his leg or something like that, and he got carted off, had an air cast similar to what we saw with Rondale Moore. Bralen Trice later in the game sort of had a non-contact knee injury. I think it was his left knee, kind of buckled when he was trying to rush the quarterback, didn't look particularly good. He was helped off the turf and whatnot. And so, we're going to hope for the best. We're going to hope that we get good news, but similar to kind of the Rondale Moore situation, it didn't look particularly good. And so I'm not sitting here right now expecting to hear good news tomorrow, but hopefully we'll get some good news on that. And obviously if it's serious injuries, for, even if it's a minor injury, it's always, not good for the player. But if it's a serious injury, it's obviously devastating for the players, given that both of those guys are young guys that the Falcons are hoping are going to be major contributors this year and potentially starters for this football team if need be. But I'm not as willing to say like, oh, these are devastating injuries to the team, right? I don't think we're at that point with either one of these guys or those particular positions at edge and safety where we can feel like losing both of these guys is devastating team. Like when you look at Bralen Trice, right? We talked about this back in May or June when we talked about what's the sort of typical stat line for a rookie third round edge. It's like 2 sacks and like 15 pressures. And like, that's not going to be the difference between the Falcons, winning, 10 games and 8 games or something like that. That's pretty replaceable talent. Now, obviously the hope was for Bralen Trice to be more than that this year. But if he's only sort of your typical third round edge that's giving you, a few sacks and a dozen or more pressures, like that's not going to be devastating to the Falcons. Now, it is a setback for, it's potentially devastating for Bralen Trice, of course, but it's also more of an issue, not for a 2024 issue because of the expected production from a rookie edge, but the long-term development for Bralen Trice, because instead of spending this year kind of figuring it out, and then you're hoping going into year 2, you can make that leap to be more than just like a 2-sack guy and maybe be a 4 to 6 sack guy and a guy that can get you 30 plus pressures or something like that. Next year, he's going to spend this entire year rehabbing, if it's a serious injury, like an ACL tear or something like that. And therefore, you're not potentially going to get that production because you're not going to get that year 2 jump because he's going to spend the next 6 months, rehabbing his knee and not really working on his craft as you would want to do. And with DeMarcco Hellams, right now he was kind of penciled in to be the dime safety. It was notable that several of the Falcons starters did not start this game. The only guys that you could say are starters that did play are like the outside linebackers and Lorenzo Carter and James Smith-Williams and Arnold Ebiketie and Bralen Trice. But Richie Grant was not in this game, and Mike Hughes didn't play in this game. Troy Anderson, Nate Landman didn't play in this game. Pretty much the top 13 offensive players didn't play. Grady Jarrett, David Onyemata didn't play either. It was telling that Richie Grant got the scratch and sort of going back to the conversation we've had now for the last couple of weeks, which is like, are these position battles like safety and corner really position battles, or the Falcons kind of settled on who their starters in with Mike Hughes and Richie Grant? And is it that telling that these guys didn't play this week? We'll see. Again, we'll wait to sort of see what happens next week against Baltimore. Like if we're going to see any of these starters compete and play in these games, it was probably going to be the Ravens game, not the Miami game, where we would see those guys. So we'll pump the brakes a little bit until we get to like Saturday at 10:30 a.m. to see who's inactive for that game. We ain't seen Grady, but maybe we'll see some of these other guys. But you do wonder. All that to say is basically like, was Hellams guy competing for a starting spot, or was he just kind of a guy that the Falcons just sort of saw as a dime safety? And if that's the case, is it devastating to the team to lose a dime safety? Like, it's a blow. It's a blow, but it's similar to losing Jalen Hawkins. Is that a devastating blow to your defense? So, I think that the real devastating part of it with losing Hellams for this team is, now do you have an insurance policy in the event that Richie Grant doesn't have the improved season that you're hoping to have, right? Where we saw last year where Richie Grant did not play well for the first half of that season, and the Falcons at the bye week in week 11 were like, okay, well, we're going to start DeMarcco Hellams for the rest of the season. And so that's what you're losing. You're losing that insurance policy behind Richie Grant this season in DeMarcco Hellams, and a guy that was probably going to contribute as that third safety in the dime defense. So, yeah, again, not to be, cold-hearted or anything like that, because, again, these injuries are tough to deal with and whatnot, but I don't know yet, based off until we see what some of these other edge rushers can do. And we'll talk a little bit more about who stood out in that group in today's game at the end of today's episode, and see what Richie Grant looks like. It's hard to say this is a major setback, but if you're of the mind that, you're out on Richie Grant, you've been out on Richie Grant for a while, then yeah, you're probably going to be, you're going to be a lot more concerned about this Hellams injury. If you were skeptical of all the other Falcons edge rushers, and after watching tonight, I'm sure there's a lot of people being, I saw a lot of people, at least on Twitter, being very critical of Arnold Ebiketie in this game. Understandably, he did not have a great game, but so like, I can understand your concern but again, was Bralen Trice going to be the savior? So I do think there are some promising signs though. Like in the edge rush room, I thought Demone Harris looked good tonight. right? He's been that guy that's kind of quietly sort of been creeping up the depth chart, and again, not expecting Demone Harris to go out there and get 8 sacks this year or anything like that, but if we're talking about 2 to 3 sacks, 15, 20 pressures, like I feel like he showed enough tonight that makes me feel like he can produce that type of production this year as a replacement for Bralen Trice. So, we'll see what he can do to build off of this game in the coming weeks. At the safety position, Dane Cruikshank, sort of working with the third string safeties, but he's been a dime safety in this league for Tennessee for multiple years. So if you need a third safety that has NFL experience, you have that guy. He put a nice hit in this game on a receiver to break up a throw in this game. So you have a guy with 4 or 5 years of NFL experience that could step in potentially for DeMarcco Hellams. Micah Abernathy, people know that, we didn't get to see a lot of him last year in the season, but I thought he did some good things in that Vikings game covering TJ Hawkinson. I got a soft spot for him because of his special teams prowess as well. So I feel like, you could probably get functional dime safety play from either one of those two guys. So that's why, I sit here and I go, I don't know if these moves are, losing Rondale Moore or losing Bralen Trice, losing DeMarcco Hellams are going to be these huge setbacks for the team, just because you're basically losing guys at this point. Again, who knows where we will be in October or November and December and whatnot. But at this point, look like backups. And it's season's not over because you lost a couple of backups. So, injuries do happen. These are things that all teams have to overcome. The adversity that hits in the NFL, the football is basically a game of, your ability to overcome adversity like this. So we'll see how the Falcons deal with this. Do they go out there and shop for safety now? I know that's been something that a lot of us thought they would do this offseason. They chose not to do that. Does losing DeMarcco Hellams mean, hey, we got to go out there and go out there and spend a premium to get another safety to be an insurance policy in case Richie Grant's bad? If they were of that mindset, why wait till August? But, we'll see what the Falcons do. So that will be an ongoing topic of conversation. Hopefully we'll get some good news tomorrow on that injury front. And these are, maybe multi-week injuries instead of multi-month injuries. But we'll just sort of have to wait and see on that end. But we'll wrap up today's episode talking about the rookies and what I thought of everybody other than Michael Penix and Bralen Trice. To a lesser extent, I thought Bralen Trice, I think he had a nice pressure on a bull rush before he suffered his injury. But, as we talked about in the lead up all summer, is Bralen Trice beating third string offensive tackles with a bull rush. That was his greatest asset as a pass rusher. So, yeah, thumbs up. So we'll see on Bralen Trice on whether or not he, that injury we're going to get good news on that. But basically what I'll say about Bralen Trice before we get into the other rookies is that, he was what I thought he was in this game. So I saw the player that I thought I saw, and, again, wasn't expecting him to come in and, pull a Javon curse and light the league on fire in his first preseason game. But hopefully he'll get another opportunity, but we'll have to sort of see on that. But we'll talk about the other rookies. We'll talk about the defensive linemen that I'm buying stock on. Right after this preseason game, I was ready to buy stock, and I was just waiting for him to make a couple of plays in the preseason. And I'll tell you which one of those guys, maybe it's a rookie, maybe it's not. And we'll get into all of that, guys, to wrap up today's Locked On Falcons. Now, preseason and training camp in the NFL is all about finding the right quality professionals that fit your team. And if you own a small business, you're constantly in search of that, but you don't have to sweat it out in the South Florida or Georgia heat. To do so, all you got to do is check out LinkedIn Jobs. They have the tools that help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just any old job board, because they're going to help you with professionals that you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't exactly actively searching for a new job, but just might be open for the perfect role in any given month. Over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. And on LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. And this show is sponsored by BetterHelp. What are your self-care non-negotiables, right? Is it, you got to, whatever. But, therapy can be one of those non-negotiables, whether your schedule is packed with kids' activities, big work projects, and whatever else. It's easy to let those priorities slip. It's hard to make time for things, even the things that we know make us happy. But when you feel like you have no time for yourself, non-negotiables like therapy are more important than ever. Therapy has taught me positive coping skills like you can only control what you can control, which I use every Sunday when I'm watching the Falcons. I can't control injuries. They happen, all those types of things. So if you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire and you'll get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Never skip therapy day with BetterHelp by visiting betterhelp.com/lockedon, and you can get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. So as we wrap up today's Locked On Falcons rapid reaction on this preseason game, I'll admit, guys, I wasn't necessarily locked in. I had maybe like 80% attention in these preseason games. I was like, what's Penix doing? And then everything else is whatever. So, we'll have to review the film to get more nitty gritty. I'm sure we'll talk more about some standout performances, how certain, back end positional battles are dealing with, but we'll touch upon some of the ones on today's. But overall, when I look at the Falcons rookie class in this first preseason game, and again, I wasn't expecting them to come in and light the world on fire or anything like that in their first action, but I wasn't that impressed with the rookie class in general in this game. Like, no one really popped to me. Like Jace McClellan had a couple of decent runs in this game. He was probably the more impressive of the running backs in this game, but the Falcons really struggled to run the ball throughout this game. I don't know if that's on the running backs, but mostly on the offensive line. And so that's another thing I do want to focus on, and what was exactly going on with the offensive line. Because whenever I keyed on the offensive line, especially on the interior, I thought, Javon Gwynn, Kyle Hinton, and Andrew Stuber, who played most of this game at center, left guard, and right guard, I didn't see any major issues when I keyed on them, but the Falcons couldn't run the football, so something was going on. So that will be something I'll have to check out when I review the game. But Casey Washington was fine. He led the team in receptions in this game. He had 9 targets, 3 catches, or whatever. I thought his most impressive play was what he did on special teams at the end of the game, where he recovered a fumble as a gunner and set up, I think, the Falcons' last score, if I'm not mistaken, or did they not score that drive? I can't remember. Again, wasn't locked in, guys. So, what he did on offense, it was fine. Nothing that makes me go like, oh, this Casey Washington guy, the Falcons have something here. It's like, yeah, he ran, hitches and caught passes. Me, like last year when people were going goo goo gaga over Mac Hollins running a 2-yard out pass. And I was just like, yeah, man, it's like, this is basic stuff. Like, so I'm not going to sit here and be like, man, this is incredible. So that's kind of where I'm at with the Casey Washington stuff. So we'll see if we can see more impressive stuff, or maybe I come away rewatching the game and being like, oh, okay, there was a little bit more subtlety to Casey Washington's game. I was not familiar with your game, as they say, right? The Shaq quote. But, Dorless, Rourke, and Logue didn't really pop to me in this game. I thought they were pretty meh in this game. They played, and I noticed when Dorless and Arnold Ebiketie were in the game, like Miami was just like, we're just going to run to that side, and they were having a lot of success, moving those guys off the ball. And again, those not a surprise to me based off of what I saw from those guys. Rourke looked like Rourke, just out there. I'm not trying to be mean or anything. Like, it just like it looked like classic Rourke of just like not really disengaging from blocks. And he's just out there. Like that's what Rourke was at Clemson. I didn't really expect drastically different. I'm going to look forward to maybe Zion Logue might have impressed me a little bit more. I got a soft spot for Zion Logue. So maybe I'll review the film and do that. JD Bertrand was fine. He missed some tackles in this game, which, seemed pretty typical JD Bertrand stuff. So again, like the rookies to me were just like, they were pretty meh for the most part, other than Penix. And it was just like, yep, that's kind of what I thought. I think that's a big reason why, going into the season, I'm not as maybe optimistic and hyped about certain things as many of you guys are, just because like I don't think the rookies are going to do nothing this year, but I don't think they're really moving the needle in the ways that I think some people think they are. But again, confirmation bias, all that stuff. So the rookies were just meh to me. So again, it's fine. It's the first game. No one's going to sit here and be like, they're done. They're bust. All like it's one preseason game. We'll see what they look like later on. But I had basically say I had low expectations and they did not exceed those expectations is basically what I'm getting at. So the one player that did impress me, the one player I will wax poetic about was Zach Harrison. I was ready to buy all the Zach Harrison stock, and my finger was already hovering over the buy stock, buy now button, and I'm pushing the button. I'm pushing the button, baby. So I'm buying all the Zach Harrison stock. I thought he had an impressive game. He flashed a number of times. He had a key pressure that led to an interception from Kevin King. I like the play of the backup corners. Kevin King and Antonio Hamilton seemed to get all the outside corner snaps. I think Clark Phillips played like a couple of series as a nickel, and I didn't really see him on the outside. King had a big interception that set up the Falcons' first score. Antonio Hamilton was out there, throwing his weight around. He was making some hits out there in run support and whatnot. So, if you are of the opinion, and I know you are, because I've yet to meet a Falcon fan that is a Mike Hughes supporter. So, if you are out there, you are a bigger unicorn than Kyle Pitts is there. So, I think both King and Hamilton gave you enough to feel like, why aren't these guys getting an opportunity to start over Mike Hughes or whatever? So, but Zach Harrison to me was very impressive. Had that pressure that led to that Kevin King interception, had a couple of other pressures in this game. I saw a player that was very disruptive. Kentavious Street also flashed and was very disruptive early in the game when he was playing as well. But yeah, I'm buying all the Zach Harrison stock. He's the one guy in this group of young D linemen that I'm actually like, that guy could actually be good this year. I'm not expecting him to get like 8 sacks and 45 pressures like some people seem to think he's going to do based off of how he finished the last year. I'm still thinking he's probably going to get like 3 or 4 sacks and maybe like 25 pressures, but be a disruptive two-way player against the run, against the pass. So I'm ready to buy all the Zach Harrison stock. So those are my thoughts on that. The QB3 battle, Taylor Heinicke did not look good tonight. Nathan Rourke didn't really look good tonight, but Nathan Rourke's only been on the team for like a week and doesn't know the offense. And so, basically he was just kind of running around, and he made a couple of plays with his legs, but, he was missing throws. Like, he had an opportunity to I was messing with the Locked On Falcons insiders because it was like there was a 2-play sequence where Nathan Rourke had wide open receivers in the end zone. He missed them, and the Falcons came away with 0 points on that drive. And I was like, I'm out on Nathan Rourke. And then they got the ball back again a couple of minutes later, and he had a big 4th down scramble. And I'm like, I'm back in on Nathan Rourke. So that's the ups and downs of the QB3 battle. But we'll see what Nathan Rourke does to push Taylor Heinicke. Certainly Heinicke did not do anything tonight that makes you go like, yeah, we definitely got to keep that guy. But we need to see progress from Nathan Rourke as he learns this offense over the next couple of weeks before, people are like, we got to get rid of Heinicke, because it's like, who are you going to keep? Because if Nathan Rourke only can just run around, it's fine. But like, all right, so we'll see on that one. But that's where we'll leave my thoughts on the game. I would just want to end today's episode by giving a shout out to one of my Locked On Falcons insiders, Eric B., who lost his sister, Sabrina. My condolences go to you and your family, Eric. Eric was sharing with me that his sister is the reason why he's a Falcon fan instead of a Cowboys fan. She was insistent on him being a Falcon fan, and he got in around the time when Vic came, so it paid off for a couple of years. And she was kind of the light in the darkness from what he shared with me. She was very positive. He said that she didn't even get down after the Super Bowl, which, it tells me that she's an incredible human being. So my condolences to you, Eric, and you just know that, like, every time you listen to me be negative on this podcast, you're only doing that because your sister insisted to you long ago that, only good things will come from the Atlanta Falcons, becoming an Atlanta Falcons fan. And so far, it hasn't worked out, but it will. Every time you see Michael Penix drop a bomb, you'll think, hey, Sabrina, this is for you. So for you, Eric, I just want to give you that shout out. My condolences. You're in our hearts. You're in our prayers. So, apparently we lost a good one in Sabrina. So that's where we'll leave it, guys. And we'll be back with more on this on probably Monday. Have some more thoughts after going through the film. We'll probably talk a little bit more about depth chart stuff. maybe get some special teams talk and sort of how that depth chart is going to play out in some of these position battles. So that is in store for you coming. By all means, tell all your friends about Michael Penix and how incredible he is going to be. And we'll hope we'll get some good news on this injury front. But, contrary to what Sabrina would like us to do, I'm not going to hope for the best on that, or I'm going to set my expectations low, right? Hasn't steered me wrong with the Atlanta Falcons so far. So that's going to be it, guys. Check out Locked On Fantasy Football. Check out Locked On all the shows on Locked On Sports Atlanta, Locked On Sports Today, Locked On Braves, Locked On Hawks, Locked On Bulldogs. It's all part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.